So I called this Ask Me Anything about this pile of documents. So think about it, documents everywhere, and so many of them stuck in file folders on computer systems where they really can't be gotten to. And because I'm very, very old, as Greg was pointing out, I have become enamored of retro computer systems. And so I chose a retro computer project to demonstrate my capabilities of my system, because these documents are quite old. To follow up on a theme, some of them are up to 25 years old. They've been converted to PDFs, but they've never really been part of the internet corpus. So they haven't been scanned by the current LLMs. And I'll show you an example of that. But also, there's a lot of legacy systems running in industry. In fact, there are systems that are 40, 50 years old that are still running, written in languages that nobody speaks anymore. And there's a huge challenge because there's a lot of documentation on these systems, but there's a lot of people that don't know where that is and so on. So if we can help them find that and help them understand it, I think we've got a winner. So imagine a world where a department could throw all of these documents into a file folder, arranged by topic, access those documents through a chat-like interface, check the accuracy via citations, not just accept the chatbot's word for it, keep everything stored locally for security. I do talk to a lot of clients, as Greg pointed out. I'm in the consulting business. Whoops, excuse me there. And a lot of them want the chatbot functionality. They just can't send their data anywhere. So we've got to figure out a way to do this. So I actually built this all to be 100% local. For today's demo, I'm actually going to be using OpenAI because my little Mac notebook just can't run fast enough to do a nice demo. So we don't want to wait 5 minutes for a response to come back, but it does work. But the solution will result in reduced time, reduced effort, reduced frustration, and less money being spent as staff tries to locate all this stuff and tries to understand what's going on. So the data is any PDF, CSV, doc, or text file, and you can dump it into a folder. I have 3 little mini applications, one of which is the vector store manager that will parse the documents and create the embeddings and store them in the vector database. Not very interesting to demo. My test data is 30 obscure PDFs that are over 20 years old, roughly 3,000 to 4,000 pages of information. I've tried numerous different models on them, and they all work fairly well, at least the larger ones like Falcon. The 7B and 13B models work pretty well. ChatGPT 3.5 and 4 do, I think, work noticeably better, but I think that's a gap that's closing pretty fast. Now, I did not do any fine tuning because I lacked a good data set, but I'll talk about that a little bit in the future work section. And our goal is to be 100% local for security, which, again, I demonstrated to myself was completely possible, but it is very slow on a little laptop. I should have gone for the 64 gigabyte Mac. So just a quick, I'm going to launch into the demo real quick because that's where the interesting stuff is. But as an example, if I look at the ChatGPT 4, I asked it, what is AMOS? So we're going to be looking at a corpus of documents related to alpha micro computer systems. I would pretty much be willing to wager $100 nobody's ever heard of that. It's a computer system that was somewhat popular in the 70s and 80s in business. It was never a consumer grade machine used in businesses and so on. When I asked ChatGPT-4, what is AMOS, the alpha micro operating system, it came back with a lot of random things that had nothing to do with our topic. When I asked my chatbot, it gave me a very nice answer. So with that, let me switch over and switch over to the demo. Can you still see my screen? Are you still good? Okay, great. Let me just, I'm not going to expand it because it makes it so wide that it's actually hard to read. Okay, so Again, it's pretty straightforward. We can say what's Amos. I happen to know there's a programming language in there called Alpha Basic. And I could just say something like, what are 3 interesting things about Alpha Basic? Now, I've got a little bit of a bug here. I've got these shadow buttons. I know that's a Streamlit artifact that I don't think there's a good fix for right now. But anyway, we got back our 3 interesting things. And actually, this is looking at this is pretty good. Now, you'll notice I've got a couple of buttons here that show up after our response. I can show the sources. Now, this is going to tell me exactly what manuals and what page numbers this was pulled from. So it read through the Alpha Basic Users Manual, the Computer Owner's Manual, the Operating System Guide, etc. And we've got chapter and verse as to where to go look for more information. I can also rate this answer with an up or down. And if I rate it, it will write that out to a log file. And all of those good and bad answers, the goal will be to take those and then in the future use those for fine-tuning the LLM. So this is generating my fine-tuning data set. I personally think one of the holy grails in this entire industry will be continuously improving learning. And for that, we need some kind of feedback. So that is my attempt there. So anyway, we've got some stuff about Alpha Basic. We can also ask about specific commands. Maybe I don't remember the format of a particular command, or I need to understand what a particular command does. So we can say, what does the systat command do? So that'll come back pretty fast. It displays the summary of all the jobs on the computer system, including the name of each job, who's using it, etc. I happen to know there's another command very similar called the stat command, and I'm confused over what the differences between the two are. So I can say, what's the difference? I can leave the misspellings in. And it should give me a little bit of a breakdown on what's going on. So systat gives me a summary of the jobs. The difference is the stat command is similar, but it continuously updates the display. So pretty straightforward. And we can go on and on and on. One thing I like to try, because it's kind of interesting, is I can ask for an example of an Alpha Basic program. And it's very random as to what it comes back with. Now, I have not trained it to do code generation. So this is purely searching through the documentation for sample code snippets. It's not generating anything. So it's got to do probably a little more work in terms of the vector store and content gathering, but it came back with a little program to print your name in reverse. And for fun, we can just see if it really works. Let me just take you back into the past here. So I've got my little, hopefully you can see my little terminal window. And this is connected to my personal Alpha microcomputer that's running under my desk. Vintage 1985, still running, a Motorola 6810. So it's running our stat program that we talked about. So I'm going to exit that. I'm going to bring up the text editor. We'll paste in our program here. I have a feeling my buffer probably will get overrun, so I'm just going to paste it in slow because it's a very old computer, so it doesn't accept input very quickly. These computers were meant to run up to 100 dumb terminals at a time on a single Motorola processor. So the operating system is very efficient, but it's not very... Okay, so there's our program. We just, we'll tell it to compile it. We do have a little bit of an error in the program. We noticed that we've got 2 line number 40s. So not a great response by the chatter, but pretty close. Somehow, for some reason, and I know that problem is not in the documentation, it synthesized that problem. So, but we can fix that easily by just changing that. Put this back, enter your name. And it brought all the characters back out in reverse order. So there we go. And we'll say no. Okay, so there is an example. You get to see a very old computer system running. So that's the chat interface. Again, let's see, I guess on this one, we can show the sources. And we see we've got Alpha Basic Users Manual, Alpha Basic Users Manual, Subroutine Users Manual, etc. So seems to work. So if we go back to our presentation, so let's see. All right, so the stack, it asked for a stack diagram, so I had to do a stack diagram. Exploratory data analysis, a lot of that was around document loaders. So I went with a fairly standard PDF document loader, and I think there's a ton of them. Manu, I think in particular, suggested using Haystack. I'm going to go look at that. I know that there are some anomalies in the responses that I believe are due to the parsing of the PDFs. It's missing certain things. I ask it a very obvious question, and it's just not finding that data. Second thing I experimented with a lot was vector stores. I started with Pinecone, but that did not meet the goal of being 100% on site, so I switched to Chroma. That works very well. Tried different embedding models, many different chunk sizes and overlaps. I ended up going with about a chunk size of 750 and an overlap of 75. That seemed to, everything in the manual seems to be very page oriented. So this tended to chunk into pages so that there was enough information to give good response. As I mentioned, I tried a number, probably 10 different LLMs. The larger models worked fine. ChatGPT definitely worked the best. The data engineering pipeline works very well in terms of, I was able to chunk through the 30 documents, 3,000 to 4,000 pages of information. It takes about 3 minutes to parse all the PDFs and embed them and vectorize them and store them in the Chroma database. And that's on my laptop. So with a substantial hardware improvement, I'm sure that would be even faster. I use the conversational retrieval chain. I had to dig a lot to understand that because there are some weird quirks with it. You can use memory and you can use source document return, but you can't do both. So I had to come up, if you try to do both, you get errors of too many inputs or too many fields being presented. So I had to kind of tear it apart, put it back together, and figured that out. But in the meantime, I found another thing that we didn't discuss in class called the multi-query retriever. And I use that in here to improve my results. And what the multi-query retriever does is it takes a look at your prompt or your answer, or your query. It actually creates multiple versions of that using an LLM. It submits all of them to the vector retrieval so that it actually returns chunks to 3 or 4 different variations of your question. It then unions those and then rakes across those and eliminates duplicates and then creates your final return of document chunks based on those variations. So that was really nice. I built the web UI using Streamlit, which is a story in itself. A lot of issues there, but it worked. It's fast. So in summary, learned how to load multiple documents from a folder. That worked pretty well. We learned tokenization, chunking, and vectorization in class, but I had to sort of industrialize that for what I was doing. The multi-query retriever was a real find that I found combing through documentation. And then I guess my biggest finding, to get good answers requires a lot of context. And so we need a model that can take a lot of tokens on input, because you're going to have to provide a substantial prompt, a lot of context from the document store, and your also the response tokens count as part of that. So the models can't be lightweight in terms of what they can handle. So future work, improve document ingestion for non-PDFs. My CSV files, they get ingested, but even though there's very clear information in there that should be useful, it very rarely gets used. So there's something going on there. Same with tables embedded in PDFs. I actually had this working, but it didn't work in Streamlit, which is to make the document references live, so you can just click on them and have a PDF open on your desktop instantly. That's an easy fix. The big holy grail, though, is the continuous learning model that will take the ratings and then use that to fine tune the model in a batch and then go back and start again. So that's my presentation.
That
Thomas,
is
awesome. Awesome stuff. Very, very cool. Does anybody have maybe one quick question for Thomas?
I have one question.
Yeah, go for it.
I was very curious that you experimented with different models as part of your setup. So
yes.
how did you, one of the challenges that I face when working with different kinds of models is the environment setup, and also, you know, time to download the model, fine tune it, and then, as you mentioned, make inferences. What were some of the things that you were doing to mitigate switching between models and dealing with dependency hell? I'm just very, very curious how you did your A/B testing and your setup.
Yep, I focused on chat models, so those fit very easily into the conversation retrieval chain setup. And so I'm not able, at least with my current environment, it requires a model that is a chat model. So that is a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. I also wasn't doing fine tuning, and so the chat models worked well enough for my purposes. Now, if I move into fine tuning, that'll be a different, then I'll probably have to tear out the conversational retrieval chain and build my own custom chain so that I can drop in more generic models. The downloads only happen once, so those weren't really a big issue. So I could use like Hugging Face or one of the other places to do the, or the Colab, I mean, to do the tuning and then download those locally once they're tuned on heavy hardware. That would be my strategy for an ML ops pipeline, I guess.
The other thing that I thought was really cool was how you implemented that human feedback loop. So I'm wondering, so I know there was another person in the course who was looking at implementing some of these feedback loops through the thumbs up and down. So I'm wondering how you're collecting the thumbs up or thumbs down to evaluate or to advise where the model needs help.
Yep. Right now, I'm just turning, though, every time you click one of those buttons, it will generate a JSON entry into a log file with an annotation. It'll put the question, the answer, and then good or bad. And so it's a future assignment to myself to process those for question answer pairs for fine tuning. So I'll basically separate those into two sets, a positive training set and a negative training set, and use those to fine tune another model to fine tune a model. So it's just it's purely writing out a JSON question answer pair set, basically.
Thank you. And I believe Melissa has her hand up.
I do, yeah, but I do want to make sure, I want to first see if anyone else has questions. I can, mine is, I know that there was a question in chat, but I don't know if anyone has any questions or if you would like to voice your question from chat. Naga, you have your hand raised. Go for it.
Yeah. Just a continuation to what Thomas said. A really impressive demo, Thomas. Thanks for this. So he takes the JSON user feedback, well, JSON or CSV, I guess it doesn't matter. But how would you feed that, or where would you feed that back in? Would you take a certain checkpoint of your existing model to feed the data to improve upon the results, or would you mix that with the original data and retrain the model or re-fine tune the model from scratch? I guess it's a general question to anybody who has.
That's an excellent question, and I don't have I don't have the answer for that because I haven't tried that yet. So I don't have a perfect answer to that, but I think I will probably select a local model like Falcon 40 or Falcon 13B or something like that, that I know will run on a local machine, and start from there and tune it to be a question answering specific model with a new front, with a new head. And that's where, if I collect a couple hundred of these question answer pairs, that'll be what I want. I can probably also mix in some generic question and answers. They don't all have to be my domain specific, but I think because this is a domain specific Q&A system, the more domain specific it is, the better it'll be. So right now, essentially, I'm starting with a non-specific QA and changing that with context, but I think adding the fine tuning will really help. I see. I can just go through some real quick through some of the other questions. Chris said, "What did you build the UI with?" It's Streamlit, and that handled all the formatting, by the way. One little quirk is occasionally, like when I asked it for an example of a basic program, occasionally it'll come back with like crazy random HTML formatting within the code block. And if I just say, "Could you please redisplay that nicely formatted?" it will. So there we go. I think that's it with the chat questions.
Yeah, well, awesome. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you. This was, I thought it was amazing. I do myself have one more question, but I'll hit you offline. I would like to, I think it would be really cool to understand if you implement some of the not just human feedback, but some other evaluation metrics, how would that improve your workflow? But yeah, awesome. Thank you. And yeah, good job.